Alright, this is lab 5.1 and 5.2. We're going to be looking at using multiple network interface cards in each of the computers. We're going to set up static IP addresses in different subnets. We're going to test pinging across the virtual network. We're going to set up firewall policy to allow pinging. And then we're going to install the routing and remote access role, configure some static routes, and then retest the ability to ping from one computer to the other computer's IP addresses. The first thing you need to do is make sure that your virtual machines have 2 network interface cards installed. It's very easy to do. You just shut down the virtual machine, open up the settings, and click Add a Device. It's very easy. Now, as you can see, I have a virtual machine here named Work1. I also have a virtual machine named Work2. We're going to start with Work1. Open your network connections, right-click Local Area Connection, go to Properties, click on IPv4, go to Properties. You can see I already have this one configured. So once you have the first one configured, just close out. Right-click on Local Area Connection 2, go to Properties, IPv4, Properties, and let's set this one up. Alright, and we're just going to set this the same as the other one except 2.1. It'll be in the 2 subnet. I'm going to go ahead and put 192.168.1.101 as the preferred DNS server. So click OK, click Close, and close the Network Connections window. Now both of our network interface cards are configured. We have one in the 1 subnet and one in the 2 subnet. Okay, next we are going to do some configuring with the Windows Firewall. So go ahead and click on Administrative Tools, Windows Firewall, right-click Inbound Rules, select New Rule. Now there are different types of rules you can create. One that pertains to a particular program traveling across the network, one that relates to a specific port being used on the network, some predefined rules here, and custom rule. We are going to be creating a custom rule. Click Next. Now we want this rule to apply to all programs, not just a specific program. If you wanted it to apply to just one program, you could insert the path to the program executable file right here, just like the example. Click on All Programs, select Next. Now for the protocol type, we're specifically talking about Internet Control Message Protocol version 4, which is basically just pinging. Now right here under Customize, you can limit this to specific ICMP types, but we want it to apply to all the types. And again, we want this to apply to any IP address, not just a range of IP addresses, not just specific IP addresses, any IP address. So click Next. We want to allow the connection, whether it's secure or not. You can require the connection to be secure in order for it to be allowed on the network, or you can completely block the connection. If for security purposes you don't want ICMP messages to be successful ever, you can just block the connection, but we want to allow the connections. And for when does this rule apply, we want it to apply all the time, in public, in private, and in a corporate domain. Click Next. Now for the name, let's just type in allow lab ping. Open back up Windows Firewall, and you can see that the allow lab ping rule that we created is here. And if you scroll to the right, you can see some of the parameters that we selected. We want it to work pretty much any time. There's the protocol type, any port, any user, any computer. So it's a pretty universal rule that we've created. So you can go ahead and close that window and log off the computer if you wish. Alright, now that we have Work1 configured, let's go ahead and configure Work2. Select View Network Connections, and I will just show you what I've got. And I'll just let you see what I've got here. Again, this is already configured. Here I'm using a 1.102, so I'm just going to leave that how it is. And let's go ahead and configure our second NIC card. Alright, and we will just use these settings right here. Click OK, and click OK. Alright, now the 2 NIC cards on our Work2 computer are configured. Now we need to do the same thing we did on Work1 with the Windows Firewall to make sure that we allow all pinging. Select New Rule, and I explained it the first time, so I'm not going to explain it this time. Select Custom, select Next, select All Programs, Next, Protocol Type, Internet Control Message Protocol version 4, select Next, keep the default, select Next, keep the default, select Next, and we want it to apply everywhere. So click Next. We're going to name this one Allow Lab Ping, click Finish, and as you can see, the firewall rule that we've created is functional. Alright, now that each computer has both of its NIC cards configured, let's do a little testing. We are now on work 1, which has the IP addresses 192.168.1.101 and 2.101. So let's try to ping those. 1.101 is successful, and 2.101 is successful. And the reason these are successful is because they are on the same machine. These IP addresses are in different subnets, so technically they should not be able to ping each other without a router. Since each NIC card is connected to the computer, when it goes to send the ICMP request out, it could check to see what address we're trying to ping and realize, okay, we're trying to ping the 2 network, so I'll use the NIC card that has a 2 IP address, and so it's essentially pinging itself, and of course that's going to work. Or if we're trying to ping, 1.101, it could say, well, I have a NIC card on the 1 network, so I'll just use that NIC card to ping 1.101, and again, it's just pinging itself, so that's not going to fail. But if we tried to ping the other server with the 3.102 IP address, it's not going to work. It doesn't have anywhere to go. There's no router. It doesn't know the MAC address of the computer. It's just not going to work. Now, we also know that the other computer has an IP address of 1.102 on its first NIC card, which is in the same subnet as our first NIC card on the work 1 computer. So this is going to be successful. Because they're in the same subnet and they are connected, they're able to communicate at layer 2 using the MAC addresses. So everything is working as it should be. Just to be extra thorough, let's hop over to work 2 and do some pinging. Now, the IP addresses we know that we have are 1.102 and 3.102. So let's try to ping both of those. 1.102 is of course successful, and then we've got 3.102. Now, the same this is exactly the same as the test we performed with work 1. Even though the IP addresses of these 2 NIC cards are in different subnets, they're attached to the same computer. So we can ping work 1 at 192.168.1.101 and it will be successful. However, if we try to ping work 1 at 2.101, it is not going to be successful because there is no router to carry the packet to that subnet. Alright, that's all for this section. Installing the routing and remote access server role service. We're going to start with the odd numbered computer here. So open up your server manager, double click roles, click add roles, place a check mark next to network policy and access services. Click next. Place a check mark next to routing. You'll be prompted to add some required role services. Click add required role services. Click next, and click install. For the even numbered computer, we're going to do the same thing. Double click roles, select network policy and access, click next, select routing and remote access services, click next, and click install. Alright, once the role service has completed installation, click close. Alright, we are back on the odd numbered computer, so click start, go to administrative tools, go to routing and remote access, right click work 1, click configure and enable routing and remote access. Click next. Select custom configuration. Click next. Place a check mark next to LAN routing. There are some other selections you could make. There's VPN Access, which stands for Virtual Private Network, and that would be if you were trying to do a point-to-point VPN or a VPN tunnel over the internet from one point to another. Dial-up access would include some customizations in order to facilitate dial-up access. Demand dial connections are basically as needed dial-up connections. NAT is for network address translation, which we're not going to work on right now because we're really only doing LAN routing and we don't have a big need for network address translation. So we're going to go with local area network routing. Click next. And click finish. Then click Start Service. And confirm that the server now has a green arrow next to it. Then we can close the window and log off of the computer. Alright, back on server 2, the installation is complete. We'll click Close and close out of this. Go to Start Administrative Tools. We're going to do the same thing, routing and remote access. Right click server 2, configure and enable, click Next. We're going to do a custom configuration, click Next. We're only going to do LAN routing, click Next, and click Finish. And we are good to go. We have the little green arrow right here. Alright, back on the odd numbered computer, click Start, go to Administrative Tools, go to Routing and Remote Access, expand Work 1 Local, click IPv4 and navigate to Static Routes, right click and select New Static Route. Select Local Area Connection 2. For the destination address, we're going to put in the network portion, the IP address assigned to NIC 2 of the even numbered computer. So let's go to the even numbered computer, open up the server manager, and check local area connection 2. We've got 192.168.3. It's a /24 network. So back on server 1, we'll do 192.168.3. The network mask is going to be 255.255.255.0. That is /24. And in the gateway field, we're going to type in the actual IP address of the NIC 2 on this server. So we're going to do 192.168.2.101. We're going to leave the metric as is and click OK. When this server receives traffic that is destined for 192.168.3. whatever with this network mask, it's going to send it out this interface, which has this IP address. That's all this is. Alright, so now on the even numbered computer, we're basically going to do the same thing. We're going to open up routing and remote access, expand work 2, expand IPv4, go to static routes, create a new route. Our destination, okay, we're going to select local area connection this time. And in the destination field of this static route, we're going to put in the IP network for NIC 1 on server 1. So here on server 1, we've got 192.168.1.101, which is a /24 network. So we're going to put in 192.168.1.0. The network mask is going to be 255.255.255.0, and the gateway is going to be the IP address of NIC 1 on this computer, which is 192.168.1.102. We're going to select OK, and we now have that static route. When this computer receives traffic that is destined for the 192.168.1 network, it's going to send it out through this gateway right here. NIC 1 with the IP address 192.168.1.100, 192.168.1.102. Alright, the next thing we want to do is sort of test out these static routes that we've got going on. So here on the odd numbered computer, let's try to ping the NIC 2 of the even numbered computer. So we're going to type in ping. We're going to do 192.168.3.102, which is the NIC 2 address right here of the even numbered computer. So we're going to try that, and we're waiting. We've got a timeout. I've got two timeouts. Odds are it's not going to work. So here we've got 100% loss. Now we know we typed in the address correctly. So why is it not pinging this address? Well, the obvious reason is because they're on a totally different subnet. But you might be thinking, hey, we set up static routes. It should be working. Well, yeah, but that's assuming that it actually gets to the router, or in this case, router role, which it's not. Let's go to network connections here, and let's open up, let's see which one we want to do. Let's just open up both of these. We'll start with network connection 1. You go to IPv4 and go to properties. We have no gateway. When a computer is trying to ping, the first thing it does is use bit level ANDing to find out if the address it's trying to ping is on the same subnet. If it's not on the same subnet, what it does is it sends the packet to the default gateway, which is, oh my goodness, nothing. So all these packets are just getting dropped. So in order to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, we need to have a default gateway. Our default gateway is 192.168.2.101. Now the default gateway really needs to be in the same subnet as the IP address that it's going to be pinging from. We might be able to fudge a little bit here because these network interface cards are attached to the same machine, but our best bet is actually to use the NIC2 here, because the IP address for NIC2 is actually on the same subnet as the default gateway. So we're going to use 192.168.2.101. Is that right? Yes, 192.168.2.101. So since this server is running a routing role, the IP address is the same as the default gateway. In most cases, that's not going to be the way it is, because on a real router, you wouldn't use its own IP address as a gateway. But this is Microsoft World, so. Now, in most cases, your IP address and your default gateway would not be the same. But for the purposes of this lab, they are the same. So click OK, close. All right, now let's try to ping it one more time. So it's still not working. Wonder why? Well, let's assume that the packets are actually making it to the default gateway, and the default gateway is successfully routing them where they need to go over the local area network. But can they get back? Probably not. Here on server 2, let's go to our network connections here and open up NIC1. NIC1 doesn't have a default gateway. All right, and we'll go ahead and set the default gateway for here too. And it's going to give us a warning letting us know that the default gateway is not in the same subnet as the IP address. Just click yes. Click close. And just to be absolutely thorough, let's go ahead and assign the default gateway for NIC1. Now that we've got all that mess taken care of, let's try to ping it one more time. See if it functions the way it should. And now we can successfully ping from one NIC all the way over to the other and back because we have our default gateway set up. And in this rare instance, even though the default gateway is not in the same subnet as the IP address of the NIC card, it doesn't matter because it is directly connected to the computer. It doesn't have to leave the machine in order to get to the default gateway because it is the default gateway. In most cases, that would not be so. So now that we've got our routing roles set up, we have each NIC card has its default gateway set up. We've got static IP addresses set up. We can now ping from either computer to any of the IP addresses that we have in our current virtual network.